Would it be fair to say that classical Indian music is primarily a melodic form? Of course, there's rhythm within there, but it's more melodic than harmonic.
Yes, it
I would
doesn't
agree.
have harmony in the way that we would consider
but
harmony.
I'm interested in this idea that sort of music comes from a single trunk, and then in the same way that languages have emerged from Proto-Indo-European, and you have all these branches of different languages, that musical forms have evolved similarly.
What has happened that in Indian music, as you both must be familiar, that harmony is not something that it is unfamiliar with. Because when we tune instruments, you see there's one melodic string, but in a fully developed instrument, there are more strings which are tuned to harmony, but there's a constant harmony. So there's not a change of harmony. As such, the home or the sa is considered the spiritual base of everything. It's like that God of the music, yet it should not be disturbed. And you revolve around it as this very individual being. Because right now, Jack is Jack, James is James, Sharanjeet is Sharanjeet. Sharanjeet cannot be three of us, or Jack cannot be three of us. So in a very spiritual sense, when we see a transition from one note to another, to another, to another, is a motion, is the movement of a soul from one body to another, to another, to another. Also, not being so philosophical, looking at the technical aspect of it, is that human voice is considered the utmost instrument that we have here in this planet. And Indian music is very deeply influenced by this hierarchy of voice, singing, then instruments, and dance. So singing is the supreme, instruments imitate the singing, and dancers imitate or follow the patterns of the instrument. Therefore, each instrument is more melodically apt than harmonically. And the third point is that because Jack mentioned that there are ornamentations, like we have bends and slides, but they're not just one note to another note, a movement without skipping the sound. But it is more so what speed of bend it is, which we call shruti is the microtone. Are we actually like giving a little bit of a more emphasis as we are sliding down? Are we just going to the note, or are we sliding down a little bit off the note, further from the note, and then a little bit on the note? Or are we going to a very dissonant unit of the frequency of the note and vibrating it to create that tension? So harmonically, it will become very difficult to do. Doing it in a group will also be difficult because not everybody can keep up with all that complexity. Right? So these values, these aspects were valued more in Indian music. Thus, they never thought of making it a more harmonic music. Right? But Jack must be aware of this, that Ustad Vilayat Khan Sahab demonstrated a scale change on Bhairavi. Right? You know that famous composition, pa 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 da ma pa da ni pa da pa ga ma pa 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 da ma pa da ni pa da pa ga ma pa da 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 da. So he has done that, but not at the same time, different instances of time. And Western classical music, a tonality is a very beautiful thing, because it is freedom from the God also. That sa, that tonic note, which has this gravity that, okay, do whatever, but eventually this is where you're gonna come. That is also taken away. So that expression is is beyond our comprehensions. Literally as well, and in musical sense as well. But now you're free and you're atonal, and you like to that's why Western classical music went there, And in my opinion, that was the pinnacle of creativity for that sort of evolution. And then it's now it's everything. The modern Western music is like everything. There's freedom, there's minimalism, there's people are composing classical, romantic style. Everything is there. There's a big amalgam. But individually, that was a tonality was like, now that's what we are going to do for a little while.
Yeah.
So in Western music, when we have, the whole idea is creating tension and releasing the tension.
Yeah.
You create tension and you will come to this point of peace. So as the musicians became, they were at their own choice to how much tension they want to create. Da 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 da. So they can like eventually create a whole series of these dissonances and eventually come to that sa. So that is also present in Indian classical music as a whole piece. When you listen to a rag, you start from sa, and then you have some other notes which are a little bit not as harmonically poetic to the sa, but then eventually you end the piece at sa, or the first note. Sa is the do, the key note of the rag. So there's some ragas like Puriya. So Puriya Kalyan is a rag where you actually tune your instrument to a very dissonant set of chord. For example, right now this is a major triad. Can you hear the sitar?
Yep.
So it's in a major triad. So many of the rags will sound very sonorous, very mellifluous on this one. But now we have a rag called Puriya where you tune it like this. So that's your background.
Let us see that left hand.
Okay.
I want to see that left hand.
So even if you're playing some happy major notes, but because this is what is actually the backdrop, so it will sound always a little bit.
That interval was banned in Western music for many years. It wasn't allowed in churches because they said it was the devil.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Yeah, so like we share all these ragas. So James was asking, there's some ragas. So someday if I'm feeling a little bit more like grumpy and a little bit more like why this and why that, so this is my go-to rag, Puriya.
Very good.
But that's a great example, that one, because that rag is quite similar to rag Marva.
Yes.
It has many of the same notes, I think, and
all the notes are same, just their application is different.
Yeah. So in rag Marva, for example, because normally in the drone you have 1 and 5, or you can have 1 and 4, which kind of like it sort of flips the tonal center round. It makes it sound like the fourth sounds like it's the root in a sense. So there you had that, the martiva, the sharp fourth, you had that in the as part of the drone. But in rag Marva we exchanged the 5th for the 6th in the drone. So you get 1 and 6 in the drone. And this actually is, I think it's probably the first time in the world that we had dual tonality, where it's actually 2 tonal centers at the same time. Now, I don't know if Indian musicians would think of it quite like that, But in terms of how I hear it, I think it falls into the same bracket that Western musicians would think of dual tonality, where you can hear the music sort of resting in two opposing tonal centers, but sort of at the same time. So it's
Is it
like
a flat six?
it's a natural six, but the natural six is usually lower than the root.
Yeah, the different microtone of that.
Yeah. Right, there you go. Yeah. With Tambura drone, when that's included as well, it creates this you get so this is deep harmony in the Indian music, but it stays where it is. So then when you play the Cornwall Ray, it sounds like it could be the flat second from the Sa, but it also sounds a bit like a major third from the Da.
Right.
From the Da, you go up Da Ni Re, that Cornwall Ray sounds a bit like a major third. So you're getting incredible constellation of like it feels like it sounds like a flat second, but it also feels like a major third, and then those are very different intervals. That's the uniqueness of that. So we have this very deep harmony.
You know Rag Shivranjani, right?
Yeah.
Mishra Shivranjani. So Marwa, which is Sa re ga ma ga ma ga re ni da ni re sa, is Rag Mishra Shivranjani. Sa re ga pa pa ga pa ga re sa. Sa re ga pa ga sa sa da pa ga re ga ga pa ga ga re sa.
So the pentatonic is a mode of the pentatonic scales within both rags.
Right. There's all these ragas actually are just there's only one rag and you just change there a little bit here and there, it becomes a different rag. But there's only one rag. There's one universal rag.
Yeah. So
they're all hosts.
The modal, the modal potential, and it's the very interesting thing about a lot of these rags have the minor pentatonic or major pentatonic scale exists, but it's kind of it's superimposed differently. So if you play like Rag Yaman, which is similar to what we have the Lydian scale with the raised fourth, Rag Yaman, but if you start that scale from Ni, and which is what we do when we play through Rag Yaman, we start through Ni and you skip Re. But when you do that, you're actually playing. If you play Ni to Ni, you're playing a minor pentatonic scale. So that pentatonic framework is in there, but it's superimposed against the root in a different position. So it's like you've got this pentatonic, and then instead of it being precisely on the root, it's kind of just switched around one notch. And then lots of different rags have a pentatonic framework in there, but it's just not starting on one, it's starting somewhere else. And so that's very interesting, because there's some kind of I don't know if that, I doubt that happened intentionally. I think that just happened because the pentatonic scale is just it has this gravity. When you take the notes of the overtone series and you put them in scale order, you get the pentatonic scale. And if you took the first 5 notes of the circle of fifths, you get a pentatonic scale. So the pentatonic scale is just like a natural phenomena that our ears, we just like it. But the genius of the musicians that came with these rags is that pentatonic scale was still working within the structure of the rag, but they were hearing it from a completely different perspective. So all of this, the harmony and the deep relationship of the notes and all the modal connections, it's all present, it's all understood. But what Sharanjeet was saying is, but the Sa is never compromised. That root is never changed, because it is actually seen as the God within the music. That was a kind of beautiful metaphor, but it's beyond the metaphor. It's actually the literal I mean, how deep would you say that that really goes? I mean, I would say it goes all the way down to the sound is
It's
God.
the final resolution. It's the resolution, right?
Yeah.
It's that thing that actually is what you seek in all those notes, and you eventually attain it in sa. So that's what sa is. And you're right, Jack, when you say that these all like it. What does we learn from that? That music is so subjective to perspective. That wheresoever you start looking from, that's how it's gonna look like. If you're looking at from the second tone, thinking that's the first tone, and that is your whole geography of music from there. So yeah, it's quite subjective. And also, one time I was doing a demonstration in a university here, and the question was Norwegian Woods, that song, which we would say is in Bageshri.
Yeah,
it's in Bageshri. So ne sa ga ma da ni sa sa ni da ma da ga re sa pa ma pa da ga re sa ni sa ma ga ma da ni sa. That's Bageshri. Okay. But from ma sa ga ma pa ma ga sa ni da sa, it becomes khamaj from ma.
Yeah.
It becomes a Mixolydian mode from ma. Otherwise, it's more so a Dorian mode from the keynote.
Yeah.
So the question was that is that song Norwegian Woods, as said, is it in Bageshri, or Beatles were trying to do it in Mixolydian mode? And then then they said it's in a rag, so we called it Bageshri because we were listening from there. So there's always this subjectivity of what was intended and what happened and how majority perceived. That's the beauty of music.